An EV company that people like to talk about from China is Xpeng. Anyway, I've been researching their vehicles as best I can and going through their financials, so I'd just like to report to you all my findings, and let's see if this company really has the signs to be a successful EV. I thought it might also be prudent to compare them with Tesla as best we can too, to help get some idea. In Q3, Xpeng delivered 25,000 vehicles. Annualized, that's obviously over 100,000 a year, which does make them a major contender in the EV industry, and these are solely BEV, no hybrids. Now, back in September, the Xpeng P7 was the number 10 selling EV in China, but 2 of the top 10 are plug-in hybrids, and the top 1 is the Wuling, which I don't consider a serious EV, at least not for exporting. Therefore, the P7 is really about number 7, and wasn't even too far off the 2 BEVs above that in quantity. In other words, if they continue to ramp, I see no reason they shouldn't be the number 1 selling BEV in China behind Tesla. The Xpeng P7 is a reasonably nice looking vehicle, inside and out, although I'm pretty sure they drew some design inspiration from the Lucid Air. They were smart enough to go over large widescreen in the interior. It surprises me how few manufacturers do this, like Ford or even NIO. On their website, Xpeng are much more open about their specifications when compared to BYD, which is going to make it much easier for me to research. And obviously Tesla do too. So let's compare them. The P7 standard range has 0 to 60 time of 6.7 seconds, which actually isn't too bad. I think most people can live with that, compared to the BYD Han at over 8 seconds, which isn't going to be sufficient for many drivers. And sure, the Tesla Model 3 is at 5.8 seconds, and used to be 5.3 seconds. The P7 has a top speed of 100 miles an hour. Okay, not great, but really, how often do most drivers go that fast? I'm sure plenty of people can live with that. The Tesla hits 140 miles an hour. The Tesla weighs under 3,600 pounds, and the P7 weighs over 4,200 pounds. That's quite a bit of difference, and would affect handling as a result. Think of how much effort Tesla go into reducing weight, let alone almost 700 pounds. This is meant to be a video about Xpeng, but I think it is good to appreciate how much further ahead Tesla is, and truly what an amazing job they have done. Remember, all those extra items inside that car that are heavier also cost money. Granted, we could say that Tesla may use lighter weight parts that cost more. On the other hand, the lightest part is no part. Alright, what about battery size then? We have Tesla with a 57 kWh battery and the P7 with a 60 kWh battery, so fairly similar in size, and they both use LFP batteries. Xpeng claim the range for the P7 is 480 km NEDC. Converted that into EPA miles and it comes in at 208 miles of range, compared with 272 miles for the Tesla. Wow, Tesla have a slightly smaller battery but produce a lot more range. Every mile of range becomes more difficult to achieve too, so to be that far ahead is really something. Sure, it's Tesla's motors, powertrain, software and everything else helping, but also the additional £700 too. That's got to have an impact. But still, Xpeng is hitting over 200 miles of range. This is with LFP batteries too, which means you can charge them to 100% all the time. Although bear in mind, in colder climates or winters, this range will suffer somewhat too. Alright, the last major factor, but certainly not the least important, the price. There's a smart version and a premium version. We'll just take the cheaper smart version at 229,900 yuan, which is cheaper than the Model 3 at 255,652 yuan. These prices do include the subsidies. Although, of course, there is a waiting list on the Tesla until early next year, I'm not sure if the Xpeng has a waiting list, and I'm not even sure there is much point in comparing price. Tesla could still raise their prices if they wanted and still fall below the market clearing price, where supply meets demand. Likewise, Tesla could also undercut Xpeng and still make a profit. Perhaps instead we should compare how much each of them cost to build. Let's guess that the Model 3 in China is about 30% margin. We need to add back in the subsidies, then another 11,000 yuan. Xpeng claim a 14.4% margin. That gives us a total cost of 186,718 yuan for the Tesla and a cost of 206,286 yuan for the Xpeng. So a difference of about 20,000 yuan. So Tesla is still able to make their vehicle cheaper than Xpeng, and customers are still willing to pay more for it. Alright, let's explore more of Xpeng's financials. They generated 5.7 billion yuan in revenue, equating to a gross profit of 820 million, which is $128 million to give you some idea. This did result in an overall loss of 1.6 billion yuan. They have working capital of 37 billion, current assets minus current liabilities. However, their OPEX has risen from 1.9 billion to 2.8 billion since last quarter, and likely will continue to rise. Therefore, I would give them approximately about 3 more years maximum at their current burn rate until they run out of capital. But perhaps they will be able to continue improving their margins, and perhaps the burn rate will reduce somewhat. But if you want some comparison, Tesla was at this gross margin at around mid-2018, and it took Tesla a couple more years to start making net profits. And that was Tesla. The P7 is at a run rate of 7,500 units a month. And the next highest run rate of models after Tesla in China is just over 8,000. Everyone seems to struggle to even hit 10,000 units a month per model, let alone Elon's definition of volume production being at 20,000. They might be at a point now where it could be tough to see more growth, and it might start to plateau. Oh, bear in mind, even Tesla nearly went broke going through production hell, i.e. ramping to volume production. No one, I repeat, no one else has managed volume production for an EV, let alone doing it with a profit. And no other BEV company has yet to make a net profit. I think this is still being underlooked. Elon has told us so many times just how difficult this is. In other words, Xpeng have a few years to try and turn their company into a net profit or reach volume production. Also, a lot of people seem to think the CCP will help them, but if anything, it sounds like the current subsidies they're receiving are likely to shrink or stop, as they have already been dwindling. Some people think some of the Chinese EVs will be nationalized, but then that would likely mean they will really hold back innovation. I can't see Xpeng having the funds like BYD did to start their own in-house batteries to further reduce costs and increase margins. Anyway, this would not be a company that I'm willing to invest. For the record, I actually was a shareholder in NIO at one stage, but I sold it all and put it all into Tesla. Xpeng are no competitor to Tesla, clearly, and this is them on their home turf. They sell their P7 for 46,000 euros in Norway and 49,000 in the US. And as for FSD, then for Xpeng is going down the LiDAR route. Therefore, they have all this additional R&D that will further affect their OPEX and reduce margins. I wish I could drive an Xpeng myself. The reviews I have seen are pretty impressive. The car drives well, looks good, has a lot of tech. In fact, it would seem it's closer to a computer on wheels than the legacy EVs, who are simply electrifying their old style of vehicle. This is underrated, but it is falling short on range. But their range could be enough for a lot of markets. I don't think the US will be one of them, especially if they don't adopt Tesla charging network. Put it this way, with that lower range, I would say it would be tough in the US without Tesla's charging network, but there are plenty of other markets for them. On the other hand, the US are investing $7.5 billion into chargers, and maybe US consumers will eventually decide that 200 miles is a sufficient range in a vehicle. But despite Xpeng's impressive growth lately, they are nearing the limitations that every EV seems to face, and likely not going to hit volume production or get through production hell. If they can't achieve this, then selling 100,000 units a year of the P7 is hardly going to have any major impact, especially if you consider how many of them would be exported to the US. Anyway, I still think it's a very important auto company to keep an eye on. They seem to be doing lots of things better than legacy autos and moving so much faster than the likes of Lucid or Rivian. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.